Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz pianist and educator Jim Holman. Over the course of our conversation, we discussed a lot of things, including his latest 2013 album, Ira Sullivan Presents the Jim Holman Trio, with special guest Roger Humphries. He talked about his roots in Chicago, the inspiration his father gave him, who also played jazz, his pursuit of a doctorate at DePaul University these days, along with playing with big shots like Antonio Hart, Jimmy Owens, Cecil Bridgewater, Donald Harrison, and many others. He opened up about his jazz journey and all its parameters. So please, dig this interview, my friends.
So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in here and ask kind of a snapshot. What has been going on with you lately?
So last couple of years, I had 2 CDs come out under Delmark Records. I've been playing the 3 main clubs in town are the Jazz Showcase and Andy's, the Green Mill, and I've been spending time there. Recently, I started graduate school at DePaul University. Oh, I want to mention that the 2 CDs that I had are with Frank Catalano and Richie Cole on the first one. They feature 2 saxophonists there, Ira Sullivan and Roger Humphries. Ira Sullivan plays trumpet and sax on this most recent one, along with Roger Humphries, who is the drummer on Song for My Father with Horace Silver. And then also I've been enrolled at DePaul for graduate school jazz studies, headed by drummer Dana Hall, and I'm studying directly under Ron Perillo, who was with Ira Sullivan for a long time as his main pianist. So, Snapshot, yeah.
Right on. Cool, man. Yeah, and so you grew up outside of Chicago. Talk to me about your childhood and how you got interested in jazz.
My dad is a jazz piano player. He has lots of albums out. Growing up, I got exposed to the more modern end of things as far as jazz is concerned. I didn't really have a typical music experience growing up where you start out with, you know, your rock or your pop or things that are more typical for children to play their teeth into as far as getting interested in music. My exposure to music was really my dad just playing in the house and listening to CDs. Like a couple that stick out is Now He Sings, Now He Sobs, and Nefertiti, Miles Davis's VSOP with Herbie Hancock. Those are probably the 3 most important recordings of my childhood. And then after during college, I wanted to go more in depth into bebop and things that are probably how most people get into jazz as opposed to those more post-boppy things. That's how I got exposed to it and got interested.
So what was it about the piano specifically that kind of lured? Well, why is it the piano for you?
I mean, I do have a fantasy of mine that one day I'm going to learn how to play the trumpet. I think that's a really charming instrument. Although, yes, my dad played piano, and that's what I heard growing up. He also has a pretty unique approach to it that brings out the warmth of the instrument with his touch. He spends a lot of effort focusing on that. That kind of opened up its appeal to me. It doesn't seem just like a machine, like it might for a lot of people starting out with, because you just lay all 10 hands down and you can make sounds happen. There's an actual voice to it when you hear my dad do it. So that was a pretty big point of inspiration. Also, I just like its orchestral quality. It's a pretty powerful instrument, so I like trying to reckon with that.
So was it always music for you when you were growing up, or were there other aspirations?
I don't know how seriously to say those. I had other aspirations. I certainly had other interests. I don't know if we're talking about 10 years old is when I started focusing on music specifically, but around that time I did have an interest in science and in physics in particular, theoretical physics, whatever a 10-year-old can't understand in terms of quantum physics. But I found that really interesting. That took up a lot of my focus. And I also, enjoyed reading and writing a little bit, but I don't think I had any, I didn't have enough passion to do something beyond some passing interest. The music ended up being different in that regard.
Right on. So were there any albums, specific jazz albums growing up that you remember that really kind of got you thinking, man, this is amazing stuff?
Like I said, those Now He Sings, Now He Sobs and VSOP, that first volume in particular, were what made it click into place. Because, I mean, I will admit that growing up, you know, from age 0 to whatever, there was a learning curve. I would hear the sounds of the angularity of jazz and kind of take it for granted just as background noise, but those albums kind of turned it into music in my mind around, maybe 6th or 7th grade and going on to high school. Those two in particular were important for me to notice not just the math of the music, but the beauty of it as well.
Well, and you've gone on in your life to play with a lot of different people, as you mentioned at the top of the hour, or top of the interview, Ira Sullivan, and many other, Donald Harrison, many other folks. What's it like to collaborate with other musicians and learn from them?
That's really all that I'm looking for. That's what feeds me, because I can be in my own head and try to approximate what it means to engage in this tradition, but really you need somebody who's been around the block and a genius enough to have authority to impart some wisdom on you. You know what I mean?
Well, and obviously along the same lines of thinking about teaching, what is your teaching philosophy?
I think that there's a lot of people that have wonderful methods that are structured and are necessary, and I think a student should search for those types of people if that's where they are in their stage or their interest. But I also think that right now that jazz is also, one part of jazz is its own tradition. Another part of it is people know well enough that if they learn jazz that they can apply it to other, professional fields, if it's in production or composition or just, it seems like most people when they start out studying jazz piano, it's because they want to understand something about harmony and a guide how to hear their way through music. So I try to figure out what the student wants. Do they want to focus on jazz because they're so in love with jazz, or are they trying to expand their overall, musical and technical palette? And then I try to go from there. And I try to sell jazz, lightly, not beat them over the head with it, but I do want to open their mind to thinking about it for its own sake, but also try to tailor-made whatever. If it's harmony or rhythms, they want to learn how to groove or swing in a pocket so that they can play better in a funk setting, for example. I'll focus on those things. I tend to shy away from method books or, a particular curriculum just because I feel like there's a lot of other people that already do that so well.
Well, speaking of teachers, in your life, who would you say has been some of the teachers that gave you great advice that you still remember on a regular basis and kind of goes through your mind?
Oh, yeah. I've been really blessed in that regard. It started out with Dave Filippo with a great jazz studio, Swain Studios in the Chicago area. Dave Filippo is a brilliant piano player around town. And then I went to Pitt and studied under Frank Cunemundo, who really had a great chord system, got a lot of great sounds into my ears and my hands. So he's changed my music forever. And then now I'm with Ron Perillo at DePaul, who, continues to challenge my ears and my idea of what this tradition is. Aside from that, I do want to give a lot of credit to my dad, who never taught me in a formal setting, but constantly gives me great insight into the music. And of course, playing with people like Ira Sullivan is a huge education experience too. So
let me ask you this: who would you consider your jazz heroes?
I mean, I have so many. I keep on going back to Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock because that's where it started. But Bill Evans for the potential of the orchestral quality, like how everything, all the musical information that Bill Evans has is so succinct and digestible, but also really thorough as far as the colors that he puts behind each note. And Keith Jarrett for his phrasing and his lyrical qualities for his single note lines. Gonzalo Rubalcaba has been a big part for me for that rhythmic, exciting, aggressive, but also the pristine articulation. Oscar Peterson, Bud Powell, Aaron Parks more recently. Is that enough?
Oh, that's plenty, dude. That's good. That's really good. So let me ask you this. Let's whittle this list down. If you could go and see a performance live by a musician at a time machine, where would you go and who would you see?
I would like to see Ahmed Jamal in his earlier phase. I mean, I know he's still around and playing wonderfully, but just to wrap my mind around him as a personality, I'd like to see, the beginning of him as a leader live. That would have been really wonderful. Of course, Bill Evans or Oscar Peterson. As far as pianists go, that's where my mind goes to first.
So let me ask you this. Do you got anything on the horizon, anything that's coming up for you that is noteworthy?
I'm in the middle of organizing some original material that I don't know if I'm going to release all at once or if I'm going to do it by singles. I'd like to see if Delmark Records would be interested in doing something. Pretty recently, I got approached by somebody to make this improvised theater project that they would be improvising singing in tandem with an improvised narrative of the play around jazz. So we'll be trying different jazz structures and I'll be trying to, some of these improvised actors, although they have music experience, might not have jazz experience so much. So a lot of the process will be, finding a way to open their ears to the way jazz standards are organized and how, chord extensions fit with the melody so that it's something that they can hear, which might be unusual for somebody who's used to more of like a folk format. So that's really exciting for me.
Right on.
Yeah.
That's cool. Let me ask you this. Everything's going to kind of come down to this question to get the essence of who you are. Everybody has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, your students, and those that hear you perform. But who do you think you are?
It seems like the music industry is really, on one hand, really disorganized. On another hand, it seems like it's opened up the democratic power for an artist to kind of assert their own personality. I'm trying to internalize the tradition of jazz on a deeper level, but I'm also trying to figure out what that means in this most recent era of music in general, not just in jazz, and trying to find something that's me.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Hey, Jim, thanks again for giving me your story, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you involving me. I really do. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Chicago, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Jim for his music and his jazz story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.